I think our goal has always been to bring customers and designers together and create a collaborative birthing of brilliant ideas, because you can't do it in a vacuum. And designers have always been inspiring designers is when we know that we've been successful. So I welcome you, and take it away. This is Sarah, who is our executive director of strategic everything, design, strategy, research, and a very eloquent speaker.
Now the pressure's on.
She loves.
Thank you. So as Tammy mentioned, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit us this evening. We're very excited to put together the presentation for you and to share a little bit about our perspective in the industry. And to get us started, I wanted to give you guys just a little bit of a background on this is what you're going to be experiencing tonight, but a little bit of a background on our company. So to introduce who Sachs is, because you're probably wondering, who are these people? Why are they an authority on anything? A little bit about us. So we, within the industry, we position ourselves as a marketing consultancy, and our goal is really to work with ambitious, vibrant companies to help further their business growth, right? And so we do that in a number of ways, but our primary areas of expertise, what we're really excited to inform or work with clients and companies on, is their product strategy and innovation, their customer experience, their content strategy, and their positioning. And we employ a variety of ways of capabilities to do that, everything from sort of traditional customer, knowing your customer personas and journey mapping, all the way through to looking at opportunity assessments and sometimes even internal workflows or on the end product development of a usability enhancement, etc. There's a wide range of things that we're able to do. And it's always kind of under the guise of being a global research company and consulting company. We are looking to understand opportunities across the board for all of the people that we partner with. To give a little bit of background on our history, Tammy opened Sachs back in 1987, and she actually opened the very first customer experience lab in NYC back in '93. So, longevity is something that I think we have in terms of established partnerships. The purpose of this slide is really to communicate our investment in strategic partnerships. So most of the clients that we work with, we've worked with for a very long time. We love getting entrenched in understanding their business objectives, their business goals, and evolving with them over time. So as you can see, there's a lot of Fortune 500, Fortune 100 clients, but we also really love working with startups and looking for new opportunities to work with products and services that are in an innovation space. So runs the gamut. I don't know how many people remember like Sirius before it was Sirius XM.
Prodigy.
Or
Prodigy.
Prodigy, or
Oh,
like got
man.
this in. We've kind of been around for a long time. Kind of been around.
British e-commerce company.
Just to give a high 30,000 foot view, our expertise and our team's expertise, what we try to do is make sure that our team members have a wide range of domain expertise, and in terms of industries that we cover and background that we have, it really runs the gamut. So people that we have presenting here today are representative of teams that work on the consumer side, the healthcare side, and the professional side, what we call B2B, but really these span all of those verticals. So financial services is a huge space we work in, healthcare, everything, e-commerce, telecom, transportation, travel, you name it. There's probably an area that doesn't exist that we haven't touched. I mean, we basically work across all verticals. The other interesting thing that we get asked a lot is, do we have the ability to go anywhere in the world and deliver the same quality and the same partnership that we can domestically? And the answer is yes. We have prided ourselves on establishing global partnerships, so pretty much in every major market, but even sort of second-tier markets, we're able to work with vetted partners. We take a lot of time and effort into making sure that our team will help oversee a project overseas, but is vetting the team that you're going to work with on the ground so that it's always culturally relevant and contextually relevant for where your target audience may be, if not in the US. And last but not least, just again, 30,000-foot view in terms of our primary methodologies. We really love sort of creating and tackling each engagement as a unique opportunity. So oftentimes we're talking about hybrid methodologies, or we're customizing methodologies to best suit the needs of the project and the engagement. But a lot of times it's easier to explain in language that folks understand, right? So everything from traditional qualitative in the realm of focus groups, in-home or office ethnography, to one-on-one user experience interviews. We also do a lot of work in stakeholder workshopping and ideation when you're still dealing with the conceptual stage, or you're trying to get your stakeholders on board with investing in a product or a service. That's a really critical time that I think a lot of times gets overlooked. And people just launch right into developing a product or service, and they haven't taken the time to talk to all the stakeholders in addition to getting your temperature check on your in-target audience. So workshops and interviews with key players are really important. And we also have the capability to do some quantitative work to complement the qualitative work that we specialize in. So online or mobile-based panels, surveys, bulletin boards, things of that nature. So we're pretty versatile. And one of our pride points, and something, actually one of our researchers is up for an award. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Market Research in a Mobile World conference that's happening this week as well. But she presented at it last year about a special project we piloted using Google Glass as a research tool, as a method for capturing in situ, in moment contextual experiences. So when you think about retail, wanting to understand your customer's journey, or at the point of sale, what we have found, regardless of how much Google wants to, or not any longer, use it as a mass customer product, I think they may have given up on it, we found it incredibly useful as a research tool, as a strategy tool. So we use Google Glass in some of our larger scale ethnographic projects. We did a huge holiday shopping longitudinal study that spanned many months between sort of pre-Thanksgiving through the after New Year's rush to return all your presents and gifts with consumers to understand what that shopping and decision-making process is. So we use Google Glass a lot, but we've also been seeing an uptick in understanding the relevance of biometrics as a method for capturing data and informing products and services. So that's something that we're excited to offer as part of our methodologies. We can incorporate eye tracking, biometric data, all of those technologies when it suits the project needs.
Like heart rate and skin conductive?
Yeah. So there's everything from facial coding, so to get a deeper read on emotional reactions that aren't necessarily able to be articulated, to the more like really in-depth heart rate read, skin read, all of that. So without further ado, I will pass it on to our first presenter, Ms. Julie Ruderer.
Great. Thanks for coming today, everybody. So we're all here today to talk about smart design. What is smart design? Well, it's basically taking in mind different considerations when you build a design. It's a really great in theory to think, I have this really cool design, I want to throw it out into the atmosphere, but it's really important to keep a few considerations in mind first. So again, you might have a brilliant idea, and that doesn't mean it's not brilliant, but just building it certainly doesn't mean that necessarily your users are going to show up. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to understand its purpose. It might not be intuitive to them. They're not understanding maybe how to use it. And last but certainly not least, there might not even be an audience for it. So, as Sarah mentioned, my colleagues and I, we've worked across different verticals here at Sachs. And what we'd kind of like to discuss next are some different tenets to kind of keep in mind when you're considering smart design that are important. This list, I should mention, is certainly not exhaustive, but these are some different principles that we've developed based on some of the different experiences that we've personally had. So we're going to start illustrating these tenets by starting with a pitfall, a common pitfall some of you might have seen different types of designs, or think about a website experience maybe that illustrates this, and then kind of finish off discussing what the reality is and what kind of the takeaway should be thinking about design. So pitfall number one, who wouldn't want this? It's crystal gravy. I mean, it's amazing. So for those of you who are SNL lovers, back in the day, this was their take on Crystal Pepsi, that joke that they did. So the idea being like, who wouldn't want this? It's totally great. When in reality, nobody wants this. Because it's disgusting, right? So the point we're trying to illustrate here is that make sure your target audience is real. It's really important to do the research and understand if you actually have indeed a target audience. This is, again, a common pitfall we've seen, but something that's very, very important to keep in mind. Number 2. We have this really great legal research product, and our law partners are really, really going to love this. It's definitely for them. It's really going to be perfect. When in reality, it's the assistant of the assistant of the assistant who actually may use this. So ensuring that you're doing the research to understand who your users actually are, instead of making assumptions about your audience, is really important. Ensure that you're speaking to the right audience, not just necessarily your aspirational audience. Okay, perception number 3. Oh, we can just use it as the same website for new and existing customers. It's totally fine. Everyone loves it. It's great. In reality, why are they asking me to sign up for their services again? I've done this before. Why is it happening again? I'm sure we've all felt this kind of frustration before. The idea here being one-size approach does not fit all. It's really important to understand your users and different types of audiences perhaps within those users to really understand what makes the most sense. If a patient wants to know the formulary status of this RX, he can click on the tab marked tiers. What does that mean? I don't know. I just want to know how much my medication is going to cost. So here, the point is, this information is located within tiers, and it's using jargon that the patient might not necessarily understand. So it's really important to speak to your audience's language. You need to really capture their words and their expectations. Just because this is maybe the correct medical language to use doesn't mean that your user is necessarily going to understand it. And then finally, checking your status is easy as 3 clicks, 2 swipes, and a password. When in reality, yes, I just want to delete the app. I can't stop playing Angry Birds, I just delete it. I just want it gone. Being here, design to make key tasks prominent and easily accessible. It's important that if you have very critical tasks, don't bury them. Don't make something that's straightforward more complicated. We have a quote here, only include the kitchen sink if you're designing for a kitchen. That's something to keep in mind. Great. So again, these are just some different principles just to kind of keep in mind. Like I mentioned, it's not necessarily, these are the end-all be-all, but just some really common ones that we want to illustrate that really we've seen across our different verticals. And just to kick things off with our consumer practice, Leslie Brown would like to talk about that next.
We thought, why not start with consumers, since everyone in this room is one, and we all qualify for this role. So what do we keep in mind when reality is everyone is a potential customer? But the thing to keep in mind is that doesn't mean everyone is. And just because you are a potential customer or consumer doesn't mean you are the audience. There might be a bigger opportunity outside of you, or you might just be a small piece of the potential audience for that product or service. So what do we do in order to keep these tenets in mind? You want to build from the outside in, not the inside out. Well, what does that mean? The inside is where you all live. It's the things you're working on, it's the products you're creating, it's the services you're responsible for. You know those. In fact, you might be the brilliance that sparked a company idea if you're at a startup. And it's really important to have that inside. It's where those great ideas might come from to lead to revolutions, like where did Uber come from? Where did Facebook come from? Where did Apple come from? There is a visionary. But just because there's a visionary doesn't mean that that's the only vision you need to be taking into account. So an example of this is someone wanting to design a site for new moms. We've got this young designer here. I don't think he's ever been a new mom. Yeah. It's a guess, but I don't think he has been. So he's gonna take what he thinks a new mom would need. And he might be a great designer, but he's still not the end customer. No matter how hard he tries, no matter how sensitive he is, he can't approximate that actual experience. And honestly, even if it was a woman who had been a mom, she can't approximate the experience of all moms. So what happens, and this is a real case study, when you might not be a new mom and you design a site for new moms, you forget, oh, she's tired and exhausted and holding a baby on one hand, and she just wants to know how to deal with diaper rash, and you gave her a word cloud as a search mechanism. And she can't find what she needs on your site. So that's why, you really do need to be with the people you're designing for, because you don't want to overlook things that you might not be able to take into account from your own personal experience. So personas are a word that come up a lot. A lot of companies are like, oh, I've created personas, we've done personas, and there's a huge range of where those personas come from, so I want to tackle them in a second. But the important thing is to create personas that go beyond the demographics. And what do I mean by that is sometimes you'll see a persona and they are moms who are ages 30 to 40. That's not a persona, that's a demographic. And those two moms could be completely different if you spoke to two of them. One could be the soccer mom who loves staying at home and cooking. The other one could be busy, has zero time at work and is away from the home space. They could both be equally busy, but doing completely different things and needing completely different products and services. If you think of them as the same person, you're missing an opportunity. So when I say go beyond demographics, one is people, like one man could be a son, a father, a brother, grandpa. It could be a huge range, so you don't want to overlook the nuances of what one person's role means as well. So here's an example. Let's speak to high school students. That's kind of a very broad category, right? What grades are they in? What are their socioeconomic statuses? How do we design for a high school student? And you start realizing as you speak to real students that they come from different parts of the country or world, that they are different genders, that they have different socioeconomics, they might have different dreams. Some might want to go to college, some might want a job. Some might have that tablet, the laptop, and all those great personal technology devices, and some may barely have any or none. So how do you then think of these different personas? You don't want to treat all students as the same person because they are not, and they all look very different with different interests. Context is important. Know where and when you'll play a role for your audience. So lots of different contexts. One is, what device are you going to live on? Are you a physical space? Are you on a desktop, a computer, a laptop, mobile, tablet? Lots of different things. Because when you're mobile, could be in multiple different contexts. You know, are you at their school? Are you at their home? Are you at their work? Are you at the gym? Where are they trying to access you? When do they turn to you? Are there times where they see you as being more relevant? Like, think of an app like Seamless. It lives across multiple devices. I could get it on a computer, a tablet, or a phone, but when are people choosing to use it? Are they leaving work when they order it? What times of day are they most likely to be eating those meals and ordering from? Things to keep in mind when designing. So an example of context is, you can't just think, oh, I'm a mobile app. This person is in her house using her phone. This person shouldn't be, but is, driving a car and using a phone. This woman is in a store. You see a lot of in-store behaviors happening, and there's actually a lot of, it's not just staying in one space. Things are living across different spaces. So the digital and the physical are interacting more and more, and they're not as segregated as we all think. How do they all work together and live together? What contexts are they being used in, and how does that vary by location, time of day, need, audience? Could be all those things. So avoid copying a best practice approach because it may not be the best for you. So what does that mean? I think a lot of the times, especially when you're starting out, sometimes you're like, what's working well out there? Who's doing a good job? Facebook, they have a lot of people. Google, they're doing great. Amazon, they're doing a great job. You know, look at this. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. Look at this. Right? Everyone knows Amazon. Oh, it sells all these products. It's really successful. But it's successful for Amazon. It doesn't mean it'll work for you. And the other thing to keep in mind with the best practice is it's only the best practice till the next best thing comes along. You could constantly be improving what's considered good enough for now.
Has anyone noticed that, it may have already been passed, but Pinterest happens to be the metaphor du jour? So it's great for browsing, but there's no visual hierarchy on a Pinterest page. So it's a great browsing metaphor, not so much if you're trying to figure out what's the most important thing. And also, another thing that comes up that's fascinating to me is we were just working with, let's call it Etsy Lite, a company, and they said, oh, this is the language that Etsy uses, so we can use this too. And that presupposes that it's work that anyone who's using Etsy understands it. Like a maker, not everybody knows what a maker means, or a tastemaker. But Etsy says it, so we can do it too. And there's a lot of Me Tooism that drives the boat.
So let's see an example of trying to copy. We've mocked this up. It's just kind of a fun thing. So this is Amazon. You got your Prime. Really works sense to get these recommended things and to instantly stream. But let's take it out of this example and talk about your finances. Deeply personal. You really need to find what you want. And suddenly it's cutesy and fun maybe, but the tone doesn't quite work, or things, how do you find the topics you care about, and it made sense for browsing for books and movies, but is this how I actually think about financial services products? I mean, can I cancel my money transfer to my ex-boyfriend? ATM camera selfies. Is that really what you need to know just because everyone's reading that? Like, how do people approach these things?
I actually would read that.
You see? Now, but you might read it that once, but then would you use this site as your go-to financial services tool or your BuzzFeed? That's the real question. And 5, use your audience to help you identify your best market opportunity. I have to say, honestly, this is the most missed opportunity I see. Is you have the visionary of the company, and it's great, and you should be putting their ideas out there and things, but you don't want to ignore what you're hearing from your audience. They could be helping you find a missed opportunity or white space where you could really be growing, and we've seen ideas almost get left on the table because they're not listened to, or there's this idea that what we started with has to be the end point. You can be mining that initial idea to find where the full potential is. Have we really reached the maximum audience we should be talking to? Do we know who will use us the most and make us the most profit? Do we know if there's one thing we'll see often, sometimes during usability testing as well, is you'll see the website and you'll go in and you'll be like, oh, you know the thing they love the most? You buried it 10 steps in. And they actually don't care about anything you're presenting up front. If you flipped what you're showing 10 steps in, you would have a huge success rate. There's a huge missed opportunity. So that's something to think about. And one way to illustrate this is you go in sometimes with an idea, oh, we think it's for dads. And you show it to the dad and he says, oh, well, it's not for me, but maybe it's for my wife. That means he was not going to be using this. Then you show it to the wife and she says, oh, it's not for me, but maybe it's for my kid. At this point, it's not for anybody. But good news, she showed it to the kid, he said, yes, it's for me, I love it. But what happens if you didn't talk to them? If you went in with the assumption that that's your audience and you marketed it for dads and it's not? Just a real world example, we worked with a car company and they're like, we have this great new car and we think it's for 20-something, awesome, adventurous, exploratory, artistic women. They put that car in front of that audience, the women said, this is not for me, I would never drive this, it doesn't speak to me at all. You know, every time I see that car on the road, who I see driving that ar? Middle-aged men. Like, literally almost the complete opposite. And if they hadn't done the research, that marketing opportunity would have gone really bad. So what to keep in mind, knowing everyone's a consumer, but they're not necessarily your consumer, and you're also the consumer, but you're not necessarily your audience. You could be, and it's good to start from some instincts, but the reality is when you're designing or creating, you're often too close to necessarily approximate the world of your audience. So assess how well your experience resonates and tailor it to each channel you're positioning it on. So don't assume mobile needs to work the same as tablet, needs to work the same as desktop, needs to be exactly the same as store, but they do need to work together. If you're on multiple touch points, they need to work well together for your audience. Check in with your audience early and often to optimize your design time and to have a successfully targeted product. Nothing's worse than investing a lot of time, energy, and money to really create this great design and then it doesn't work. When if you had done it kind of little piece by piece and built with their feedback along the way, you wouldn't have invested all that time and energy and you'd end up with a product that will get you what you need the most. Determine how your audience views the landscape versus how you do. So again, that's that inside out. You might have a view of what consumers need in shopping experiences and what will revolutionize hailing a cab or whatever the thing will be. But make sure you understand how they currently think about it. What is your competition out there? Do they really need that or want that? Is there a strong pain point that you're solving for? Or are they like, no, it's kind of good enough the way it is right now. I don't think I would take the time to do what you're doing. It's really important to know early. Identify features and content they really want or don't so that you can be building what will be a huge success tomorrow. And understand how your brand promise resonates across every touch point. Don't think of it as an isolated, oh, we built an app or we built a thing. Any place where they can see you is a place where your brand needs to be loud and clear and proud. And it needs to all work together so that it doesn't feel like you're one person online and another person in a physical space or wherever else you may be for them.
Anybody had that experience? I'm just curious, where you see a brand that you interact with across channels very often, and it almost feels like you're having a different brand experience in each one.
Catfish. Yeah.
Spotify. at least for me anyway.
Yeah, me too. Spotify for sure.
Just as a heads up, in case any of you are trying to take notes or taking pictures, we will have a little takeaway for you that recaps all of the implications and sort of recaps what we've given as our primary design principles on your way out, so don't worry.
So where Leslie was talking about how everyone is a consumer, and we are all consumers, and we can design for consumers. We're not all tax lawyers or financial advisors, so designing for the B2B space is a little bit more complex, and how we get there is a little bit different. So my name is Pete. I lead the B2B team here at Sachs Insights, and we're talking about deep domains, complex domains, where it's a little bit more difficult to get access to people and get access to information how to design products for these complex domains. And we build our team around people who have domain experience as well as a passion for UX as well. So that's how we build our B2B team here. So when we're talking about the domain being extremely complex, that we're limited in the opportunities we have to speak to customers by privacy issues, time constraints. We're talking about lawyers are literally billed by the hour, so their time is literally money. And it just makes it a little bit different how we're going about understanding what they're doing. So I want to give a little bit of snapshot about the mindsets of people and designing for different types of professionals and the types of people that we work with. So there's lawyers they're very much deductive thinkers. They're looking from big picture, looking to drill down to finite issues, and they're constrained by billable hours, as I mentioned. IT executives are another space we speak with. They're solutions-oriented, engineering, process-oriented. They're linear thinkers. They want one thing followed after another. So when they're going through a website, they want information delivered step by step. Financial advisors or investment managers or traders, they're quant-focused. So they respond more to numbers than to infographics or charts. And they also work more and more in bigger teams, so they delegate their tasks to other people. So the financial assistants, they're people who are more detail-oriented. They don't want to screw up these orders that their bosses are handing down to them. They want everything to be to a T precise.
And Excel is their metaphor.
Yeah, spreadsheets, numbers,
Lest you think
grids.
you can pretty it up, it's their metaphor.
So as many of the things that Leslie spoke about apply also to the B2B space, but there's a few more things I want to talk about about how we overcome these challenges of speaking with people and understanding these complex domains. So one thing that we do is we involve all stakeholders across organizations and development teams into the research with this SMEs, we call them our subject matter experts. So within a law organization or a financial services organization, there's people who understand that domain, that are involved in the product development process.
They could be product managers.
They could be product managers, yeah. If they're not former professionals in that space, they can be product managers who just understand the space. So we involve them in all different phases of the research. So here we have a few shots of different activities that we've done involving stakeholders and subject matter experts. On the left there, you see this is a moderated interview where we have the subject matter expert or product manager in the room with the moderator, helping to act as like a translator for not only that deep domain knowledge, but to understand what they're doing and how they're working, but how that information applies to the product. They can also help uncover different nuances and details for uncovering opportunities for that space. And then this is a stakeholder workshop. This is something that we would run after research, where you're getting all the people involved in your organization who are from marketing, product, content, and they're working together in these collaborative activities that gives them like ownership of those findings. They're interpreting what the data was from research into meaningful bits for use towards the product and for the vision going forward. And it's really good at getting everyone aligned and on the same page and really taking the findings to heart and moving forward with it. This is more along the lines of like a best practice, like Leslie was talking about. Identify all the audience members in relation to their workflow. And a good example of this would be, we worked on a product where they designed this portal for executives, for financial advisors, with all these different tools in it for them to do all sorts of different things. And what we found out by speaking to them was that all those things were done by their
Not
assistants.
all of them, but a
A
lot
of them, yeah. A lot of the
Onboarding.
tools were done by the assistants. And so it begs a question of know who you're designing for, know the entire workflow, know their how the different players interact and intersect, and design for those people who are going to be doing these functions within the workflow. And we can talk. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about how we get to that. The downside is you are at risk of making a mistake like this. So this is like a masked product shot from something that we worked with, where they had this vision that these different traders and investment managers would all be able to work together and collaborate and share ideas and
On a third-party site.
have this cool workspace for collaboration. But they didn't take into account that they're very private over what they're doing, they're very secretive over the information they're sharing, and not to mention the harsh regulatory environment where if they were to collaborate through this third-party platform, and they would have massive sanctions from the SEC, and it's just not it's not feasible to do something like that in this
A
world.
non-starter in the legal profession.
Yeah. Okay, so another way to uncover the gaps and really get data for where it's hard to find data from these deep domains is to do these iterative techniques. And these are some techniques that we've owned here, particularly as it relates to workflow mapping and design strategy. And it can also be applied for persona development, usability testing. And the way we do it is, so we're going to take the example of, let's say, a lawyer doing a transactional workflow
IPO.
for like an IPO or a mergers and acquisitions. So we bring in the partner from a law firm, have him talk about what are the broad strokes of the transaction. He lays out these, high level, 30,000 foot view of the transaction. Then we bring in the next persona, the more like junior guy, more of a doer persona. He fills in the gaps. And we have him working directly on the same board. So he comes in, this guy, our partner, he maps it out on the whiteboard. We keep this up there for the next person to come in. He fills in the gaps. Then we bring in, keep going down the line with personas, keep having them layer their workflow on top of each other, and it covers all this detail and nuance, getting this 360 view of the entire workflow, how all the different personas interact, what their different pain points are, and it uncovers things that you wouldn't get by sitting in an office with a lawyer if you were allowed to, or just having one interview on its own. Typically, research is done the traditional ways through contextual inquiry, or an ethnographic study where you're sitting in their office and observing them doing work, but you're not getting the richness of detail that you need in order to identify where the opportunities are in the space by doing it this way.
One thing about that too, that because I was part of that and I observed the team do it, is that we had this preconception that we couldn't get more than an hour of a lawyer's time or an investment banker's time, and the more junior people are tethered to their chair. But the fact is, we had some highest billing lawyers in white shoe firms. We couldn't get them out of the room. When you give them a whiteboard, just like everybody else, moms, kids with sneakers, they love to talk about what they do, and nobody wants to hear it at a cocktail party.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear a tax lawyer talk about what he does.
I mean,
He doesn't. Unless you're me.
Tell them in
Yeah.
detail
So
what
we
they
say,
do
what
and what's
happens
important to
next?
them. They
What
won't
happens
stop.
next? And tell us
They'll
why.
know everything you need to know.
Yeah, we had a guy cancel it. He had a flight to catch. He canceled his flight. He caught the next one because he was
He was
so
into
into
it.
talking.
He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to give us half the story.
So next is engage each persona in creating, using, and optimizing the experience. And to do this, a good example of this is a card sorting technique that we employ here. And this is for design strategy, so how you're architecting a site and how they're going to be experiencing content through the site. And this is an iterative methodology that we use. It's different types of card sorting techniques. I don't know how familiar you are with card sorting, but it's the idea of taking a bunch of concepts on cards and they have them organize them into different buckets to match their mental model of how they think about different things. And it ultimately results in the navigation structure on a website. So these different types of methodologies get into testing, having them organize, test, validate, and ultimately optimize different navigational structures. And we do this with each different persona to get their different levels of perspective on the different domains. So we've done this with legal content, IT, financial services. So reverse card sort is like it's like a treasure hunt where we present them we present like a navigation structure and say, go find this and see if they can hunt through the tree to find what they're looking for. Okay, and lastly, respect your audience's jargon and their mindset. So these domains are complex enough. You don't need to complicate it even further by throwing fancy marketing language in there. Just make it simple for them. And another thing is, a lot of designers are right-brained, but if you're talking to a financial advisor, they're going to be quantitatively oriented. So you want to use numbers and language that matches the way they expect it. So here's an example of a software, an IT services vendor. This was the top navigation that was on their site. You know, so they have products, services, support. So they're a vast array of IT services they grouped into buckets called products and services, basically. And then when we asked their clients, their customers, how to organize those same concepts, they grouped them in these groups: mobile, cloud, security, DevOps, application management, more tech area focused that aligns with that better aligns with the way that they think about these things, and they can more effectively find them when they're coming to the website. Say, I need a cloud management server. Where do I go? Is that a product or is that a service? I don't know. They didn't know either. So if you arrange it in a way that speaks and matches the way they think about things, they're going to more effectively use the website. So, wrapping up, these are some I guess, high-level concepts about how lawyers think, or how lawyers, IT execs, these different types of professionals think. And the implications for them are, if you have a deductive thinker, cross-referencing for lawyers is going to be key. It's going to save them time. They need things that are going to be efficient because they have billable hours. An IT executive needs clear and stepwise navigation in order to find things, concise navigation that matches the way they think. Financial advisors, financial services people need more numbers-oriented than infographics. And for FA assistants who are more detail-oriented, having confirmation screens, systems that speak to each other that reduces errors in data as systems are speaking to each other. So these are some.
One comment about this that I've observed, again, just like outside in, is that a lot of these domains are changing a lot because there's a pressure to produce more with less time. So you'll have the senior-most lawyer who's out pitching, and the guy that you thought didn't touch really key areas of something actually doing it. Or you'll find that a lot of non-IT people in lines of business are making decisions. They don't speak IT speak. So they have to come to the same front door and try to find a solution for them that is not in IT speak. So you have to, it's multifaceted when you look in the B2B space, B2C space. In the B2B space, it's changing all the time, and different users are coming to the same front door with very different understandings. Just like the same thing with what a nurse practitioner knows and what a medical specialist knows. I mean, and Aaron's going to speak to that. But those are just
well, and one of the real challenges,
different segments, but they all go in through the same door, and they're all technically B2B.
Well, and like how I started was that we're all customers, but we're not tax lawyers. But these tax lawyers have the same expectation over how a product should work and how it should be designed that any ordinary customer does. So there's a real challenge that the designer's facing to make something as elegant and fluid as Amazon is, for example.
So one of the biggest things that cringes, we hear the biggest cringe quote in the back room is, you know what we use? Google. They should make it like Google, because,
Everybody wants to.
and then you're trying to have billable content, and, you know, you're up against.
Free content.
So the last handoff of the evening. My name is Aaron Villa. I'm the Director of Healthcare here at Sachs. I'm going to be talking a little bit about design for healthcare. And the reason we place this at the end of our presentation tonight is because when you think about it, healthcare is really a combination of B2C, business to consumer, and B2B, depending on who you're talking to, right? Patients, and they use the word patients, and people don't necessarily like to be called patients, but again, that's sort of insides, right? Patients, they have a high need for information, but they tend to have a relatively low level of medical understanding. So if you're throwing information at them and it's too technical or too too scary or data-driven, they tend to react negatively toward that. You're often engaging with these customers, with these patients, out of a need rather than a want. If we go to shop for something, or we go to pick out a phone, or we go to a store to have an experience, that's usually a willing experience. Whereas patients are often told they have a situation or a disease they need to deal with, and so they're looking for an experience, but it's really driven out of because they have to. And so that really changes their mindset a lot of the time. It makes willingness to do so a burden and a little bit of a hurdle that designers need to overcome. And the thing about this idea, that patients tend to be a little bit more emotionally driven versus their doctor or insurance provider pharmacist counterparts, right? Their health, everyone's health is a very personal and emotional experience, regardless of who you are, and it can often be overlooked, depending on who's creating the thing. If it's sort of dry and technical, and you're telling them real valuable information, but it's not done in a sensitive way, again, you risk really losing that audience, having them tune out, and that's the end of that story. On the other side of the aisle, we always talk about HCPs or healthcare providers as if they're all one thing. And you've heard this theme throughout the evening that it's not always the same thing, right? So we could be talking about a primary care physician or a specialist who has really, really deep knowledge about a certain disease area versus a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. And then healthcare providers tends to also include pharmacists or even insurance providers. We all love them, we all have to deal with them, but they're considered healthcare providers even though they often end up becoming healthcare roadblocks, right? And so thinking about if you're designing an experience for them or an experience for doctors who interact with them, what does that need to look like? They all have varying agendas and they all have varying levels of knowledge. So again, it's that one size fits all, it's not gonna work. And time tends to be limited. We hear that over and over and over again. Everyone feels like his or her time is valuable, right? Doctors, maybe even worse than lawyers or anybody else you can think of, feel like their time is, it's gold and don't touch it. And, I don't have
And they also have to see 27 people
I don't have
a day.
7 seconds between patients to do that thing you're asking me. Make it 3 seconds. And then when you make it 3 seconds, they say, I don't really have those 3 seconds because I was eating lunch with one hand and answering that email with the other hand. Make it happen in 1 second. So doctors really create that challenge of the shrinking window of time that you need to hit them in. And again, they tend toward rational decision making. They to a degree, have to remove themselves from the deep emotion, especially when you talk to oncologists or people who are dealing with very serious kind of end of life things. They can't become a basket case every time a patient comes into their office, right?
So they become the opposite.
Exactly. The danger is that they become statisticians, or they become they start spouting facts and figures and percentages and survival rates, and if that translates into some sort of an experience for a patient, it kind of creates chaos.
I just have a great quick story about that. We went to, let's call it a major center of excellence for oncology, and the doctors had built an app to have women decide whether or not they should have a mammogram every year after 40. Or because it's debatable and they have things change all the time, like why have that much exposure if you're not at risk? So the way they show the difference between women who were at risk and women who weren't in terms of the likelihood that there would be a bad outcome was to have genderless bobbleheads. And they would have the bobbleheads disappear to show that they died.
Oh.
And we just looked at it and we thought,
Sorry, what's that again?
Sensitivity.
I didn't get
it's the insensitivity, like an oncologist, we call them the actuarials of medicine,
Yeah.
but they think about what is the risk of radiation versus the risk of a false negative. You could speak to that better than I, but all I know was that as a woman, I saw people that had no breasts and they were bobbleheads, and the way they showed risk
Death rates.
death rates was to remove the bobbleheads
Right.
from the page.
So it was supposed to be a patient-facing idea.
It was supposed
and
to help people make
to
decisions.
demonstrate risk, to illustrate risk, they would have these bobbleheads disappear to show that if you do X, these are your chances that you'll be one of those people who disappeared. Yeah,
So we
it was
told them that this would, if they released this, 100%
Terrifying.
of women
Yeah.
would get a mammogram every single year. Definitely.
So again,
Because they didn't want to be a disappearing
continuing this
bobblehead.
idea of kind of guiding principles, and we've really been leading this evening by counterexample, right? But I think what you should take to heart is that it's very easy to think that we know, right? And we all rely on our knowledge base, and that's good. It's necessary. You can't move from square one if you don't have a knowledge base, if you don't have an instinct, if you don't have an idea or a first design. But very highly skilled people can lose sight of these things. So the first is not to overwhelm patients. We kind of already talked about this, but I just want to show you an example of giving a patient too much information that's in the wrong language. So this was from a breast cancer website that we were helping them refine. And they came to us, they said, we think it needs an update. It looks a little dated. This was the kind of, when you click on Understanding Breast Cancer, this is the very large menu that comes up. You'll notice that a lot of, not only are there too many items, a lot of the words for someone who's, I mean, imagine you've just been diagnosed with this disease that's going to change your life, and you see ductal carcinoma in situ, DCIS. No one knew what that meant, really overwhelmed, not sure what they were going to find. A lot of people were leaving this page because they just felt like it was too much. They would go to Google and type in breast cancer. But if you were brave enough to type on diagnosis, you got a page that looked like this. And for those of you who have ever traversed through things like the old WebMD back in the day, it looked kind of like this, right? 1 million links, trying to be organized, but completely overwhelming. I couldn't even blow this up to fit so you could read the words because there was just so much content on the page. And again, this is not to insult anyone, but this was designed by people who really know their information area and really thought that they were communicating everything that someone would need to know. But the truth was, people just didn't want to dive in, especially early on. And that's something we have to understand is the patient goes on a journey, right? So you can't start giving them every bit of information, especially if they're in that sort of shock or denial or whatever they might be. Another one is this idea we've been finding of moving beyond intrinsic rewards to engage patients. So in terms of design, it's been a very slow process, but what we found is, perhaps counterintuitively, telling someone if they bring their blood sugar down, it will help manage their diabetes and they'll live longer. Or if they eat a more sensible diet and get some exercise, it'll lower their risk for a heart attack. These really valuable life-extending bits of advice do not tend to motivate people, right? We are creatures of habit. We are creatures of, if I don't really see that it's hurting me or feel that it's hurting me, I don't really need to change it, right? It tends to take a very serious event for someone to kind of wake up and re-examine what's going on. So what's happened is, with a lot of other areas, especially like B2C, they want something a little bit more immediate. Like, reward me in a way that I can see. Reward me in a way where it's happening now, so that I feel like I'm working towards something immediate, I get a reward for it. And if it so happens that it will help my overall health, all the better. But that hireable doesn't seem to be enough to fight this idea where people kind of just stop engaging with something. So a company came to us. They were trying to find this idea of kind of a reward program. This was for people with diabetes who need to manage their blood sugar. So the idea was, if they achieve their A1C goal, A1C is kind of their 3-month blood sugar average, and everyone has a number, and they're trying to get that number within a certain range. So if they were able to do so, the company came up with this idea of giving them a produce voucher. So they could go and they can get like $10 of free fruits and vegetables at some leading chain. Seemed like a good idea. You're encouraging them to eat healthy. They get an instant reward. Great. What we found was barrier after barrier after barrier. Well, what do I do? And I have to redeem it, and I have to get it. And it just became this long litany of all the reasons why this seemed like too much work. So we worked on transitioning this into a more immediate thing that's sort of an integrated thing. We said, what, let's make an app. It'll track your blood glucose. It'll help you track your A1C. And when you hit goal, you'll sort of have these weekly and monthly rewards that will be triggered automatically, like an instant e-coupon or something like that, so that it takes out all of the purported work. They get healthier, and they also get this kind of intrinsic kind of extrinsic reward, and they go, oh, great, 2 for 1. Another idea is making information travel effortlessly. I think I won't belabor this because you all live in this world, and we know that interconnectivity is it, right? And if it just sort of stays somewhere in a book or on a page or on a computer, that's not enough, right? We want everything to talk to each other. Everything is about finding Wi-Fi and communicating across platforms and channels. And this is translating slowly but surely into the healthcare range, right? There's regulatory restrictions and then there are complications. However, people expect it in the same way in B2B, where people expect their experiences to look like what they're used to with a Google or an Amazon. In healthcare, they say, you know what? When I do this, I can check my bank statement on my phone. Why can't I do that with my healthcare records? Or when I do this, I can buy my order here and then check that I got it when I get home. Why can't I do that with my doctor's information that he gave me? So we're seeing things also from the HCP side, from the healthcare provider side. EHR stands for Electronic Health Records, for any of you who don't know. It's now the law, it's getting implemented, but as I think everyone probably suspected would happen, anyone old enough to know things like Betamax and VHS, if you ever heard of those things. But a more recent, yeah, sorry, I'm dating people in the room. A more recent example, when they were trying to move to Blu-ray, there was a competing, right? There was an HD DVD, and they kind of sort of had these format wars. It's the same idea. They're creating multiple electronic healthcare systems, but the truth is, some of them talk to each other and some of them don't. So if your endocrinologist is on system A and your cardiologist is on system B, they can't trade your information seamlessly. They can't look at your record seamlessly. This creates a massive problem and a massive challenge / opportunity for people who are designing to try to create translatable frameworks. This is a huge, huge space that is just going to grow in the next few years. From a patient side, again, this was from diabetes patients. They were talking about, what would your ideal app look like? What would it do? What would it not do? What could it do for you? And this was completely unaided. We didn't say it had to do anything special or it had to have any features or abilities. And if you look at the bottom row, unaided, they came up with 3 very interconnected ideas, right? This idea of syncing their tracking of their key health indicators. So letting the doctor know what's happening, perhaps sending things out to family members. I don't know if you've ever seen this thing. It's called Sugar Track. There's a new app. It's intended for children or people who want to share their results. They test their blood sugar. It instantly sends a text message to whoever they deem necessary, and it reports what their blood sugar was. So mom can know that John checked his blood sugar at school because she got the thing and she sees what it is. It's this idea of interconnectivity. Access to medical professionals on demand. Again, there are restrictions there, but they came up with this need to want to be able to get answers without calling the doctor and waiting on hold for half an hour to be told, sorry, I don't know. And this idea of a community of disease sufferers. Again, an internal-facing word. I defy you to call your patients sufferers if you're trying to market something for them. But this is kind of how the healthcare industry talks about them. But people really wanted access, right? And on-the-go access to people. So it's like, I'm really feeling this pain in my hands. My arthritis is acting up. To have that at their fingertips, have access, the idea of connectivity. They don't want to sit down in a closed environment, read a website, which is very one-on-one, and that's the end of that information. Or to talk to people from a bulletin board that's built into their phone, and then say, oh, this is what I'm feeling, or have a picture of a body and hit the pain points and send that to their doctor, so that when they go to the doctor's office, he already knows what they're coming in to talk about, discuss. Another one is this idea, we talked about it earlier, but HCPs want more data in less time, and it's really about that challenge of how do you do that. We had a project with a client, a major pharmaceutical client, was trying to understand how do doctors get information, where can we talk to them? For any of you who may work in the pharmaceutical industry, typically they have these representatives, sales representatives, who travel from doctor's office to doctor's office, and we'll talk about medications and procedures and what's coming down the pike, et cetera. And access to those people has gotten more and more restricted as time goes on. These conversations just aren't happening. So they were trying to figure out, where do doctors want to get information? What kind of information would they engage with to learn about procedures, surgical procedures, medications, healthcare topics, et cetera? And they wanted to see across many different channels. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the ones that really came out are the ones that rely on quick and to-the-point interactions, email. This idea of a mobile alert. Doctors can have things like e-prescribing apps like Hippocrates on their phone. These mobile alerts sort of pop up and give them a quick flash of information. Things mobile websites. And interestingly, this sort of social media and gaming idea, it's creeping into healthcare more and more, just like people are talking about things like gamification and such. This site here that's cited, it actually gives hypothetical patients or hypothetical symptoms, and doctors kind of compete against each other to diagnose and come up with a course of treatment. They see what their peers said, and it really, really engages them and also educates them at the same time.
Which one?
I'm sorry?
What's it called?
This one, it's called Quantia MD. It's things that didn't engage them as much were the ones that honestly go more in depth, right? We'll leave direct mail with the Somewhat Dinosaur alone, but video and e-detail, right? This was the idea, like this great video, they made doctors watch it, and they said, this is awesome, it has everything anyone would need to know, this is it from top to bottom. Would you ever click on it? Never in a million years. Why not? It's too long. I don't have the time. I'm not going to go through with it to see that it has everything that I need. Same thing with an e-detail. E-detail would be something that a sales rep comes to their office, shows them a little presentation on an iPad. They said, well, what if we put this on a site? You could just get it at your leisure, because it's all about your time, doctor. So at your leisure, you would go, you could click on it, you could go through the presentation. Doctor said, this has everything I need to know, not in a million years. Why? It's too much time. So it really was about creating this content. They decided not to go down these channels because despite the robustness of what they could offer, nobody was going to see it, and it really wasn't worth the investment. And lastly, the idea of organizing information that's targeted at healthcare professionals in medically relevant ways. Doctors in particular are kind of a strange animal in how they think about things. And often sites are organized by alphabetical or by disease, or things that make a lot of sense from a very kind of academic search way. But doctors don't think this way. They may think about body systems. They may think about lines of treatment. What do I prescribe to a patient first, second, or third? They may think about symptoms. They don't necessarily think in the exact same ways that someone designing this site might think. So we did a study looking at an information site, and what we found is that it was really working for academics, people who researched, but it wasn't working for people who were trying to diagnose and treat patients. Why? Because the thing was created and organized almost like an encyclopedia. And they really just didn't think that way. It wasn't really designed for the way that they needed to think, and they needed that they interact with it. So the client came back to us and said, well, this site isn't really designed for people to make treatment decisions. It's really designed to give academic information. And my counter to that was, but you have this whole untapped audience, and they're already using it that way. Don't you want to make it the best experience that it can be so that you can increase it? And they said, that's a really good point, right? So they were almost limiting themselves by arguing that having this very straightforward organization was speaking to those they intended to speak to, kind of leaving everybody else in the dust. The amount of information was amazing. It was just difficult to find. So just a couple of things to recap about talking to these two different sites. We do a lot of work in sort of looking at journeys, right? This is kind of the buzzword of the last few years, although to be honest, it's always been an important consideration in terms of research and planning for your audiences. We talked with a company who does a lot of work with healthcare providers, and we said, well, what is kind of your HCP journey? And they said, oh, we use the patient journey as a proxy. We just sort of, we know what the patients are going through. We figure that's what the doctors are going through as well. And we were on a phone, but if we hadn't been, they would have seen our jaws drop as we said, is it really the same thing? So we're actually working on something, borrowing a little bit from what Pete's team is doing. We're working on sort of an iterative patient journey where patients kind of tell us what they go through, and doctors tell us what they go through. Typically, you would look at that and kind of put it on top of each other and see where there are gaps or disconnects. We're looking at having the doctors say, this is what the patient's going through, and then having patients react to that and say, no, this is wrong, and he thinks he told me that, but that's not what I heard, and really trying to get more of a 360 view. And it seems like a little bit of a simple idea, but in asking around and talking with colleagues, the answer is no one's really doing this yet. And so we're really excited about developing this and getting more to know, rather than guessing or taking those disparate pictures and putting them on top of each other and sort of see if the picture comes out.
We also know that, from a lot of studies that have been done, that when patients are in the doctor's office, they're usually so stressed out, their cognitive load is really, really high.
Right.
And what they take away is
we heard a statistic. They've talked to patients who had just come from being told that they had a certain disease, and it was like a 5 or 10 minute interaction. And at the end of it, we talked to the doctor, and they said, hey, I told them the following points. I think they probably got like 80% of what I said. A vast majority of them remembered 10% or less. And a number of them said, the doctor told me, you have diabetes, and that's the last thing I heard. So there's this amazing, exactly, or cancer, or what have you. There's this amazing disconnect. Even diabetes may not seem as serious as your end-stage cancer, but people, again, emotionally reacting, turning off, and so they may have gotten a bunch of information. So we hear things from patients all the time. My doctor never told me to test my blood sugar. My doctor never told me I had to take the medication the same time every day. My doctor never told me. You talk to the doctors, they go, of course I told you that. Of course I told you that. So that's a huge challenge. And in terms of design, how do you do that? You
And
know,
it's
coming
sometimes
up
not
with
even
system.
written on the pill
Exactly.
So you
So just
think
some-
the pharmacist would
Some
want
really
to
quick
double-
implications here in terms of designing for patients, you know, so using the patient journey to organize. Patients really think about what happens to me first, what happens to me next, what happens to me then, what should I be doing first, second, and third, whereas healthcare providers don't necessarily think that way. But organizing for patients when you're creating any kind of experience is really going to target them. And this idea of offering levels of complexity. There are a lot of people who want to know the technical names. They want to see the data. They want to see the trial information. But a lot of people don't, or they just want to understand it. So this idea of giving a snapshot and then allowing, having illustrations be clickable, or having parts of an app they can unlock if they want it, so that no one gets overwhelmed, but the information is there. And on the HCP side, again, stressing this idea of show me what's new or what's changed on first glance. Doctors want to get in and get out for whatever this experience is, even if it's on a piece of paper. And I said, I don't have time to read a paper, give me 3 bullets, and we'll be friends. Design in ways that will alleviate pressures, whether it's time or processes or complexities. And lastly, don't forget that there are people too, not only this idea of gamification, but they have experiences as consumers. Doctors say things like, oh, that's cool, or oh, that would, some sort of emotionally based reaction. Although they think rationally, they do like these sort of differentiating things that tap into that. So just to recap, because we're at the end here, I just wanted to kind of hit up these 5 things that Julie began with, just as an overarching thing. And what you'll probably notice is that as we were speaking specifically about B2C and B2B in healthcare, that these are really the overarching things that we've been kind of digging a little bit deeper on for the specifics. As Sarah mentioned, we will have a handout that has these on one side and has some of the tactics on the other as well. So thank you so much for coming. What I'd like to do is just spend a couple minutes here. We are at time if anybody has sort of questions for the general audience, and then we'll disperse, and there's some goodies, and we can talk individually if anybody has
Our
questions.
team is going to
for
stick
any of us.
around. Julie and Leslie cater to B2C audiences. Erin caters to healthcare. Pete caters to B2B. You're welcome to stick around. We have plenty of drinks, food. Enjoy and ask questions. But to Erin's point, if there are any burning questions that might be relevant to everybody, feel free. We're happy to stick around.
I was thinking about the last thing that you said, when you said don't forget doctors are people too, and also what you said earlier saying that they think rationally. So is it that, they think rationally when it comes to their patients?
Correct.
Because they kind of emotionally, they're able to distance themselves, but when it comes to themselves and what they like to do, then they're as emotional as anybody else. So it's the kind of hat that you're wearing, or the lens that you're looking through at that point.
Exactly, and I think it's also marrying. So we say, all right, so doctors are time-driven, they want rational information, boom, boom, boom. But there's a difference between giving them a white screen with 3 bullets and making it some sort of an experience where they're getting the exact same information, but it's tapping into that thing of like, oh wow, like this is cool, I'll look further to the next screen or the next what have you, as opposed to, they tend to read scientific journals, which if you ever pick one up, it's black and white. There might be some statistics, but that's about it. And so anything that breaks them out of that, the problem that we often see is that when people try to break doctors out of that, they swing too far, and it becomes a very consumer-feeling experience. They say, here, doctor, let's create a mock patient, and you can decide how to treat them. And they go, great, but A, that's going to take me a lot of time, and B, I see real patients all day. I don't need to create a mock patient to understand how to treat this. Tell me what I really need to know. So it's kind of dancing that line of figuring out how do you stay true to getting the information through quick and rationally, but making it in a way that's engaging. And I think the engaging side tends to fall off with HCPs, and the emotional side tends to fall off with patients. We get very technical when we try to talk to consumers about their health because it's a complicated thing, and people get very frazzled very easily.
Also, just like healthcare has changed a lot. I mean, doctors that were trained in their 50s have a very, very different reality about the veracity and the credibility of information than residents now. They're used to learning through video tutorials and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot, when you put HCPs, you just can't go on them. That's the whole thing about this patient journeys,
Right.
But there's no personas for doctors. There really ought to be, because not just by age, but by other factors.
And we find, across all the verticals, across all the areas that we tend to touch, there's assumptions, right? Like older folks won't do X, Y, Z. But you find that that's not true. You know, there are some doctors who say like, I don't need a phone that does anything except call people. You know, that's a common thing, not just for doctors. On the other end are people who have their their phablet and they have this and they use it in rounds and they're really just totally engaged. And then there's everything in between. So that idea of not making assumptions and one size fits all, it just it's not true anymore. And so I think that's a part of it as well, is deciding like patients totally want a mobile app, but doctors want like a pamphlet, and those days are really quickly vanishing. I think.
To that same end, it's great to know like, okay, they want it rational, but they want it to be appealing. So then you approximate it, but that's why you need to put it in front of them. It's hard to guess what that actually looks like in the flesh, and it usually takes time and putting it in front of them and narrowing and getting it closer and closer to the target so you really get the product where it needs to be.
General question, I mean, this could be for anyone. It sounds like you deal with a lot of what I'll call frontier concepts and frontier insights. So let's say with any of your clients, when you have something new, how do you know, and what is the process of educating the client in, look, we've come up with this concept, or we see this something that we've gotten from the insight you have, the research you've commissioned us to do. How do you know you're dealing with the right person in the room? Are you that you're speaking, that you have the right person to convey this concept to? Does the question make sense?
Pete was talking about this a lot actually in his B2B section about getting this in front of stakeholders, and this is just a larger issue of you don't want to do research in such a vacuum that you just become kind of part of a machine. You pop out the research, it goes off, and you never see it again, and it's in someone's hands who doesn't understand the context or how to use it or what to do with it. And it's really important to get buy-in early, so before you've even kicked it off, get all the key stakeholders, people who are going to have an impact. Make sure they're part of that discussion when you can, because they're the ones who are going to need to buy into implementing it. You need to get them excited and engaged very early in the process, also so that you're not leaving anything important to them off the table that needs to be taken into account, because they're the business experts about what they think they need. And then workshopping it with them, presenting the results, and then using that to follow up with brainstorm sessions. Make sure that there are action steps that everyone agrees to. So it's not in a vacuum, here are some maybe recommendations, maybe you should take them. It needs to be something everyone is excited about and everyone is buying into and sees a way forward on.
And building on that, we've seen with some of our companies that they'll take some of this research and they're trying to figure out throughout the organization, like in an example like a pharmaceutical company, we have patient journey work, and they said, you know what, we want everyone to be educated, from the research scientists who are trying to discover the molecules, to the manufacturing people, to the marketing people, to whoever. We want to put this in front of them because we don't believe that it's not useful. It may not be useful right now, or it may actually be useful and they just have never seen it before, but they were really experimenting with putting it in front of everybody and found that it was incredibly helpful because for as much as people design whatever, whether it's a medication or a system or an experience or a product, doesn't matter, they're always surprised by what they don't know about what they're doing or what they're making. This idea, I mean, to bring it back to healthcare, a little specifically, adherence, compliance with medication is a huge problem, right? Here's your pill, take it once a day for 30 days, have a nice day. And we see drop-offs. People don't refill their prescription, or they take it once a week, or they take it when they remember, or they take it when they don't feel good. And the question, a lot of people try to answer this question, and it's amazing that the assumptions people come in with. They say, well, here are the 7 reasons we know why people don't get their medication. And you get in the room and people dispel that. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong, it just means that that might not be the driving force. Like, too busy is a factor, right? But then you say, well, what about the weekends when you're not too busy? Yeah, sometimes I don't take it either. Okay, why? Right? So you're trying to dive into that. So it's like you're solving for these supposed issues. Telling that to somebody who's not just marketing the thing, right? Marketing whatever you may have designed, but actually creating it or thinking it up, helps shape what you're doing, right? And you can see that. I think probably everyone in this room has had that experience. Getting something that is really solid, but doesn't feel quite right, versus something that feels informed. It feels like it came from a place of like, of course, like I never knew I needed this and now it's the best thing that I've ever seen, as opposed to like, yeah, like yeah, I would use this, yeah, you know, and that sort of reaction, and it's trying to close that gap between like, you know, like maybe and like definitely, and that's obviously the challenge that everybody faces.
The beauty of our role, oftentimes, and we welcome playing this role, right, is that we're the objective third party. We're oftentimes Switzerland in the room, and that is intentionally a partner to the design side, to the designers, to the developers who are ultimately having to deliver on the experience and the concept, but also meeting all of the business and marketing goals. So a lot of times we are asked to communicate or to explain the need for understanding, you know, the user's perspective, or why is this necessary. And one component that I think a lot of times is overlooked or missed is the opportunity to engage an objective third party who can come in, who not only understands business objectives and the ultimate goal, but can also represent different opportunities, different ideas, different suggestions, a source of feedback that is outside of the bubble that oftentimes exists within the design or the development team that have been working so closely and so passionately on delivering something that was ultimately somebody's baby, right? And our goal is to never throw the baby away with the bathwater. It's to truly provide next steps and actionable direction for how you can incorporate not only feedback from your audiences, but ultimately what's going to deliver on the business objectives and the business goals. And so that's a role that we welcome playing, and oftentimes why we're brought into the fold.